Hip hip hurrah, there sutton am I, gradular mid doggen, Tildera. Hooray, hooray, it is the 17th of May. Congratulations to all my Norwegian friends. It is Constitution Day. And because it is Constitution Day in Norway, and we commemorate that day in 1814, when Norway thumbed her nose at the entire Western world and decided she would be an independent country once again and not submit to what the Brits and the Europeans had decided for her, namely that she would be governed by Sweden. That lasted less than 100 years, for by 1905, the crafty Norwegians had found that the Swedish king hadn't adhered to their constitutional demands, and they challenged the Swedes to a war, one where the Swedes never showed up. So today we are going to discuss constitutionalism, responsible government, and what, in this postmodern age, what ideology is attempting to undermine it. Regarding the complete corruption and undermining of our democracy and national autonomy here in Canada. Moreover, the ideological source of our ruin is not properly known as woke. It's correctly named cultural Marxist critical theory. And its essential premise is based upon a lie, and not even a carefully crafted one. The elite rely on the fact they have made us fearful, demoralized, and dumbed down to the point where we have become incapable of doing anything to counter their tyrannical control. And why have we become incapable? Because we have believed what we have been told by those we have entrusted to both educate and govern us, who have betrayed our trust. They have portrayed what is arguably the freest and least racist nation on earth as a patriarchal tyranny, even as they seek to erase our past and vilify our national heroes. And might I add, the same damn thing is happening in Norway. Hans Nielsen Hauge was a lay preacher that went around Norge during the time of the British blockade, because Norway and Denmark had allied themselves with France, and people were starving. And Hauge both preached the gospel and helped establish businesses wherever he went to help those starving people feed themselves. And of course, the authorities hated him for it. So I go on. They have betrayed what is arguably the freest and least racist nation on earth, or portrayed, I should say, what is arguably the freest and least racist nation on earth as a patriarchal tyranny, even as they seek to erase our past and vilify our national heroes, just as they did with Hauge in Norway. If Canada was actually a patriarchal tyranny, or if Norway were actually a patriarchal tyranny, why then have we become a haven for those fleeing economic depravity, political corruption, and unrest from every far-flung region of the globe? The mischaracterization of our past is obviously intentional on the part of the elite, since it is the reason that Justin Trudeau has been able to successfully lead Canada, and the Norwegian government has successfully led Norway down a path not unlike what Mao did in China during the Cultural Revolution. But how have we become so susceptible to this radical ideology? Cultural Marxist critical theory is being taught in every university in Canada, and likely most in Norway as well, because it was my wife who warned me about it, and she had attended the University of Oslo. And it's being done so at the taxpayer's expense, where it has been a key part of curriculum for decades, particularly in the humanities. If you do not believe me, simply open a search engine, type the name of any university which comes to mind, and search its curriculum for critical theory. Canadians need to understand that Trudeau is a perfect reflection of this toxic mindset. Even if we were to rid the nation of Trudeau, Our challenge lies in how to encounter the ideological possession that has possessed him, which now possesses the broader population. And that will be not so easily accomplished unless we are able to precisely understand the nature of the ideology which is driving so many of our fellow Canadians and fellow Norwegians to want to destroy our energy and manufacturing-based economy while undermining our culture and the institutions upon which our parliamentary democracy relies. Note that Trudeau himself has asserted that Canada has no core identity. If we have no shared national identity, it is then no small wonder why he has stated that Canada is the first post-national state. Of course, this is nonsense. But when has nonsense stopped Trudeau from stating patent falsehoods when no reasoned argument would serve his radical purposes? If Justin Trudeau has a legacy, it will be as the great deconstructor. He has managed to tear apart our cultural foundations and replace them with pipe dreams, which is why his government just issued passports that resemble an IKEA coloring book, where all symbols of our shared heritage have been adulterated and replaced with nonsense. I will read a short excerpt from Mikkel Claire-Neeson's brilliant description of the toxic mindset behind critical theory from his seminal work entitled Manipulation and the Weapon of Guilt, Collectivism Exposed, since I could not possibly define the terrible, debilitating effects of this ideological possession better than Mikkel. All credits for what is being read I give to him. I am quoting him verbatim, and I will provide you the link where you can read his work for free or at very nominal cost on Kindle. And I begin with an excerpt. Democracy in itself cannot radicalize collectivism. Therefore, socialism, within the context of a democratic system, is very different from traditional socialism. In an attempt to protect, maintain, and secure the continuance of what has now ended up in absolute collectivist greed, the Marxists have put into use awful methods of suppressive psychological undermining. Now we find they use orchestrated, designed, and calculated psychological coercion, subliminal conditioning that utilizes a weapon of guilt and enticement. Coercion is accomplished by means that are identical to the methods commonly known as Machiavellian egocentricity, which is described in psychology as the elusive ability to manipulate, subdue, and control others in order to achieve personal ends and desires. This results in weakening the general society and even worse, further weakening society's emotionally weakest citizens, the codependent collectivists. Conversely, the emotional weakness empowers the radical collectivist part of society even further. The more deprived the collectivist is, and therefore the more manipulative and malignant, the stronger the collectivist. Note, the political spectrum known as right and left is actually purposely being manipulated. The fact is that the essence of freedom lies in the proper limitation of government. Indisputably, throughout history, no source has proven itself more deadly and destructive than the authority invested in government. While this is general knowledge to those who enthusiastically advocate freedoms, most, unfortunately, are uninformed. Accordingly, this creates the perfect environment for deception. Indeed, an accurate political spectrum from left to right would undeniably begin with freedom. Example, non-intrusive government, self-sovereignty, and self-determination, defined by little or no government control. Thus, the political spectrum would end up on the left with totalitarianism. Example, authoritarian dictatorial government, subjugation, and tyranny, defined by unlimited government control. In accordance, A correct paradigm would begin with ideals of anarchy, endorsing no government. Next would come the ideals of libertarianism, also known as classical liberalism, endorsing limited government. Thereafter would come modern liberalism, also known as social liberalism, endorsing greater government. Ultimately, the spectrum would end with ideals of fascism, socialism, and communism, endorsing totalitarian government. Conversely, perfect deception is achieved through manipulating this spectrum by placing those who are in favor of egalitarianism, the notion of social equality, also known as Marxism, example communists and socialists, on the left wing. This would place those who are not in favor of social equality on the right wing, which is more than half of the political spectrum, including fascists who are in favor of complete government control. Although the fact is that communism, socialism, and fascism promote the same set of radical collectivist ideals of totalitarianism, dictatorial, intrusive government. However, by affiliating genuine right-wingers, individuals in favor of minimum government control, with totalitarian fascist regimes, example Hitler's Nazism, the perfect diversion is created. Hence, relying on ignorance, the left and right paradigm is in fact a well-known method of deception, known as divide and conquer, or the Hegelian dialectic. With one, that I just added, but that's what it means. That's Hegel's famous dialectic of divide and conquer, with one purpose: to create confusion and so achieve emotional and intellectual control. This technique consequently sets up the populace against one another, walling of those who want to remain in authority to promote and achieve their exact agenda: totalitarianism, total government control, and that's where we're headed. Anasiri had a doctor's appointment in Manotick last night, and we stopped into the burger joint on the way back to Finley Creek. An elderly lady invited us to sit with her, and we got into a bit of a political discussion, also philosophical. She was a complete Malthusian. She believed that she believed that population was exploding and the world could no longer serve the number of human beings on the planet. This is one of the famous transhumanist lies. The fact remains is that in the West, we're not even replacing ourselves. Families that have fewer than 3 children per family are not adding to the population. The West is undergoing a population collapse. And then she went into the fact that we can't feed the planet. Well, the fact is we're producing more food than ever, which is why the communists are waging war on food production. And then she got into the real transhumanist aspect of it by saying that we're going to evolve beyond the need for family, that there will no longer be male and female, and no longer be the family unit. And although she was completely unaware of the source of her ideology, she was an elderly woman here in Canada, was a complete and utter manifestation of cultural Marxist critical theory and its transhumanist, hideous ideology that is literally trying to deconstruct the nature of man. So now you are reminded again why I call myself the reluctant prophet. Because if we don't stop this, if those of you who listen to the Food for the Faithful channel, if we don't stop it, if your churches don't stop it, it will stop us. It will prevent us from gathering to worship. It will prevent you from leading a free life, free of excessive government intervention. Several times, and I mentioned this prior, several times, I have asked pastors, leaders in local fellowships, and indeed the former editor of the PAOC magazine, if I couldn't help them develop a speaking series on warning Christians of the greatest apostasy of our time. Each time I've been turned down. The church is failing its commission to represent Christ in the earth and to counter apostasy. If those aren't things to think and pray about on this day when we celebrate the Norwegian Constitution, I don't know what are. I am in constant prayer, even when I get up in the middle of the night to urinate. I am crying out for God. Because I know that there is nowhere to hide from reality. So I seek to hide myself in the greatest reality of all, God. This deconstructive ideology is attempting to create, by applying enormous resources to breathe life into a system that cannot possibly exist on its own. We must be the counter-revolution. God bless you, folks. Pray like you've never prayed before.